But I learned a lot over the course of writing my very first book, Aisha at Last. And one of the things that I didn't even realize I was doing until I was done, I don't know, the fifth or sixth draft, was that I was really hitting a lot of the plot points and the tropes of a Pride and Prejudice type of story. So Pride and Prejudice is probably one of the most popular and famous, I would say, OG romantic comedies in the world, written by Jane Austen. It's a classic enemies to lovers type of trope, which is my personal favorite. And it has misunderstandings, and there's a couple of key scenes in it. And a friend of mine who was a writer was reading my book and said, "Oh, you're doing Pride and Prejudice," and I was like, "No, no, I'm not." And then I reflected on what she said, and I realized I am doing Pride and Prejudice. So why don't I do Pride and Prejudice? And I really leaned in. And the minute I kind of embraced the idea of writing my own version of one of my favorite novels, the book kind of sort of came together. And after having done that, I realized partly it was fear. It was because I was writing a book that is unapologetically Muslim. Like, it's a very Muslim book. The main characters are Muslims. It's about a very close knit insular community in Scarborough. I was worried that the book wouldn't really be able to attract the kind of attention that I was looking for, be able to be published traditionally in, through one of the big five publishers, big five at the time. And so, what I thought I would do is kind of hedge my bets. Like, everybody loves Pride and Prejudice. It's one of those books that has been, there's been lots of very famous retellings of this book over the years. So I was like, okay, I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm writing something that maybe is not often seen in the Canadian publishing scene, a very, very diverse book that centers Muslim South Asian voices, that, it takes place in, at the time, this is 2015, 2016, I was writing this, a corner of the city that is never discussed, Scarborough. And I'm gonna turn it into Pride and Prejudice, but the Muslim version. Growing up, as I said, I was a voracious reader, but there were such few books that really represented even part of my experience. Like, I actually went through a whole phase where I was only reading South Asian writers. This was a long time ago, so they were probably like Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni and Arundhati Roy, and I can't even remember. There's so many of them, and yet they were still, not the light commercial fiction that I was looking for. They oftentimes are very heavy books. They're beautifully written. Like, don't get me wrong, gorgeous gorgeous books, but oftentimes they were very sad. They were like tragic stories about oppressed wives, and domestic violence, and it was like Monica Ali's Brick Lane and those types of books, which again are valid stories and really important. But I was like, but don't we deserve a happy ending? Where's our love stories? And on the other hand, I was reading these stories about like these white women who were finding love effortlessly, like Bridget Jones's Diary and everything Sophie Kinsella has ever written. And I'm huge fans of the classic 90s, women's fiction as well. But I just very rarely saw anyone who looked like me, any part of me, and like whether they're South Asian, whether they're Muslim, definitely not Canadian, represented. And I was like, this is what I want to write. I don't know if I'll ever get anywhere with this, but I'm going to try. And that's really what started me off. It feels amazing. It's fantastic. My first novel was optioned as well by Pascal Pictures, and that was amazing. I think that was probably the most shocking thing that happened to me. I was just like, if I get my book published, that's all I really want. This is like a lifelong dream that I've always thought about and hoped for. And then when it was pretty soon after its Canadian release was optioned, it was amazing. And then with the second one, by that point, I now have a film agent. So when my second book was basically going through the editorial and the publication process, even before it was published, my film agent was out there shopping it, which is very common. It happens with every single book that's been published now. That's very, very common. And I was just lucky to fortuitously, it landed in the hands of Mindy Kaling's people. And I guess they were looking for like diverse South Asian kind of light rom-coms. I later found out that You've Got Mail is like one of her favorite movies. So, it was meant to be. I didn't know that when I wrote the book, obviously. It was just, sometimes things spark at the right time. So I'm really excited. I'm a huge fan of Mindy Kaling's. I've watched everything that she's done, and I'm a huge fan of hers. So I'm, looking forward to what happens.